Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. We'd like to ask everyone to take a seat so we may begin. My name is Carolyn Monte, and I'm the head of our programs and stakeholder outreach for UNESCO's Diversity of Cultural Expressions entity based in UNESCO's headquarters in Paris, France. We are really honored to have all of you with us here today for this important event, which is co-organized by UNESCO under our Ashburg Program for Artists and Cultural Professionals and PEN America's Artists at Risk Connection. Please kindly note that we have simultaneous interpretation available in English, French, and Spanish. You just need to use the ear shell to access this. And now, without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce our Director of the UNESCO New York office and representative to the United Nations, Mr. Elliot Minchenberg, to provide his welcoming remarks. Thank you.
Ambassadors, dear friends of culture, dear partners, ladies and gentlemen, it is a real pleasure to welcome you here today to this event to raise global awareness on the protection of artists in times of emergencies. And let me begin by thanking our partners, Norway and Italy and PEN America, who have accepted to join forces with UNESCO today to shed light on this critical issue. I would also like to extend a special appreciation to our distinguished panelists for joining us to share their unique testimonies and experiences. And we look forward to listen to you soon. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not a coincidence that today's meeting is being held within the UN premises. In 2017, the Security Council adopted a landmark resolution to emphasize the responsibility of the international community for the protection of cultural heritage in conflicts. This resolution has contributed to guide UNESCO's long-standing advocacy and work in this field. But the human dimension of culture should also be taken into account in the discussions here at the UN, and notably the protection of artists and cultural professionals. The figures are indeed alarming. In 2021, 1,200 attacks were perpetrated against artists worldwide. Filmmakers, especially women, who question certain narratives or dominant trends or challenge norms are regularly subjected to intimidation, threats, harassment, and even arrests. Writers, poets, theater directors are too often imprisoned for speaking out, accused of endangering public order. Musicians face violence, arrests, or see their instrument destroyed. Yet, when an artist is targeted, it is a fundamental right that is threatened. It is the freedom of expression of all that is endangered. Beyond personal tragedies, it is the identities, the traditions, and the transmissions of music, stories, secular practices that are then at risk of disappearing. And it is also a whole sector of the economy built upon their practice, which is suddenly affected. Moreover, it is important also to recall that in times of crisis, artists and cultural professionals play an essential role in promoting dialogue and peace. And it is true in conflict-affected areas, but also in crises such as the COVID crisis pandemic, as we saw, and the role of artists was very clear during that period. Safeguarding culture and the voice of cultural professionals is not just a secondary need during crisis, it is a security and humanitarian necessity. It is therefore absolutely essential that they be properly protected. And this is why UNESCO's report, Defending Creative Voices, published in 2023, calls for a strengthened protection of artists and cultural professionals. And the UN can play a crucial role in this regard. As the UN agency with a global mandate in the field of culture, UNESCO has been increasingly engaged at the forefront of responses to emergency situations. Through the UNESCO Ashburg Program for Artists and Cultural Professionals, we are supporting governments and civil society organizations to boost the protection of artists and artistic freedom. And here, Ambassador Løvold, I would like to particularly express our gratitude to Norway for for its significant contribution to the program. Through this engagement, UNESCO has developed different projects to support artists in all continents, including in Afghanistan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, Lebanon, Rwanda, Somalia, South Sudan, Ukraine, and Yemen, just to name a few. In Sudan, for instance, we have worked to create a safe space where artists are able to continue producing and sharing their work. In Ukraine, we have collaborated with national and international NGOs to offer grants and residency programs for artists and actors inside and outside the country. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that many of you will join these efforts to strengthen the protection of artists in emergencies. We have noted a growing mobilization among member states around this important topic. In particular, a group of champion countries is leading these efforts here at the UN, and we are pleased to have Ambassador Greco from Italy with us today. Your country has been a staunch, tireless advocate for the promotion and protection of culture, and I thank you for that. As we call for the international recognition of artists and cultural professionals as a group requiring specific attention during emergencies, the engagement of all member states will be critical. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for these words. I would now like to invite His Excellency, Mr. Andreas Lvoy, Deputy Permanent Representative and Chargé d'Affaires at the Permanent Mission of Norway to the United Nations, to share some opening words.
Thank you, Caroline. Excellencies, distinguished guests, and dear friends, the Mission of Norway is honored to co-sponsor this event organized by UNESCO and PEN America's Artists at Risk Connection, and to welcome such a remarkable panel to raise awareness of the importance of defending the freedom of artistic expression. I would like to start by thanking all of you for being with us here today and for joining us in defending creative voices. Norway remains strongly committed to protecting and promoting artistic freedom, as reflected in our own strategy for freedom of expression. One of the ways we actively engage in favor of this right and the status of artists is through our ongoing support to the UNESCO Ashberg Program for Artists and Cultural Professionals. Today's event is made possible thanks to this particular program. This is the main operational arm through which UNESCO supports both member states and civil society organizations in the development of both normative and regulatory frameworks, as well as also implementing innovative advocacy, research, and also capacity building towards ensuring that freedom of artistic expression and the social and economic rights of artists are respected and protected. The organization of this event and the participation of all you here today is truly a testament to our common concern for the global state of artistic freedom, a right that is among the guiding tenets of UNESCO's 205 Convention on the Protection and Promotion of Diversity of Cultural Expression, as well as the UNESCO 1980 recommendation concerning the status of the artist. Our presence together today reflects our solidarity with artists across who, as we all know too well, endure continued threats and violence of their artistic freedom of expression in too many countries. The risks they face in emergency situations are especially alarming. The critical voices of artists and other cultural professionals are under immense pressure across different regions. It is time to strengthen international cooperation to enhance their protection. We need to urgently take concrete, coordinated action to countering the persisting infringements upon their rights and to assist artists who are particularly at risk in the most severe circumstances. The UNESCO Ashberg Program currently supports over 40 countries in the promotion of the status of the artist and artistic freedom. notably through facilitating technical assistance to governments in conducting relevant reforms, as well as by providing financial assistance to civil society organizations, and by doing that to safeguard artists' rights on the ground. The program places particular attention to artists in emergency situations, including through projects, as we just heard from the director, that are currently implemented in Ukraine and also Sudan. These important efforts to advance artistic freedom are carried out in close cooperation with NGO partners such as PEN America, PEN International, Perpetuum Mobile, Artists at Risks and Safe Havens Freedom Talks, along with others who lead actions at national and also local level, involving affected communities and key stakeholders. Currently, Norway is the sole contributor to this powerful UNESCO Ashbur program, a program which is truly making a difference for people around the globe. In order to sustain and increase its impact, we need more countries and partners and donors to help reinforce it even further through financial contributions and also strategic partnership. We therefore invite UN member states and other partners here today to join Norway in supporting the UNESCO Ashbur program to empower creativity and defend creative voices worldwide. I thank you.
Now we would like to warmly welcome Mr. Gianluca Greco, Deputy Permanent Representative of Italy to the United Nations, to provide his remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Excellencies, distinguished artists and guests, it's a pleasure to join UNESCO, the mission of Norway, and other partners at today's event that aims to raise awareness and mobilize support for artists in times of emergency, a cause to which Italy is firmly committed. The protection and promotion of culture in all its form and context are at the heart of Italian foreign policy. Artists and culture bear an enormous impact in fostering dialogue and in building peaceful, inclusive, and just societies around the world. In Italy, we know that art transcends boundaries, languages, and ideologies. Culture weaves together diverse threads of our shared existence, and artists are often at the forefront of change. Through their work, they challenge barriers and amplify marginalized voices. Artists and culture professionals can play an essential role in shaping the innovative, multi-stakeholder responses to today's complex, urgent, and multifaceted challenges. Such principles inspire our long-standing cooperation with UNESCO, which dates back to more than 70 years. Italy attaches the highest importance to its membership and supports the organization's activities by means of human and financial resources, as well as through active participation in its programs. In times of crisis, artists are also key in showing the path to recovery and prevention. Their creations, whether paintings, music, literature, or performances, forge connections, fostering empathy and understandings. In emergencies, their work becomes even more critical. They document the pain, resilience, and hope of communities affected by conflict, natural disasters, or political upheaval. Yet, despite their vital role, artists encounter tough challenges, often facing threats, harassment, and attacks for their creative expression. Furthermore, there is no protection mechanism during crisis that artists can access. They have remained an overlooked group despite their immense contribution. For all these reasons, Italy is deeply committed to safeguarding culture and artists in crisis contexts due to armed conflicts, the effects of climate change, natural hazards, pandemics, as well as to the fight against the illicit trafficking of cultural heritage, particularly through the commendable programs carried out by the Carabinieri Special Unit for the protection of cultural heritage. There are a range of initiatives being implemented by diverse stakeholders worldwide, such as the provisions of emergency grants and other types of urgent assistance, as well as programs facilitating access to temporary art residencies, evacuation and resettlement, safe passage, and the provision of international protection. I trust that today's events will allow for a productive dialogue on how to enhance coordination among the different existing initiatives to further support artists in emergency situations. I'm confident that our discussion will be relevant also for the aspirations embedded in the Mondial Cult 2022 Declaration, including its affirmation of culture as a global public good. In this vein, I'm pleased to announce that the UN Group of Friends of Culture will be launched soon. Together with other advocates for culture, Italy would work to provide a platform bringing together member states' voices on culture and their contribution to sustainable development. The group will aim to promote the integration of culture and creativity into international discussions, also in the broader spheres of climate change, education, and the digital environment, among others. Together with the other co-chairs and UNESCO, we will be sharing further information soon. Distinguished guests, let me conclude by saying that in defending creative voices, we safeguard our collective heritage. Let us stand together, artists, policymakers, and advocates, to ensure that art flourishes even amidst adversity. For when artists thrive, societies heal, and sustainable development becomes a reality. I thank you.
Now I will invite our three guests to join the room, and I will invite Julie Trebot, who is the director of PEN America's Artist at Risk Connection, to join me on the stage, and she will be introducing our special artistic performance before moderating a panel discussion. Thank you.
Welcome. It's my pleasure to be with you today. First and foremost, I would like to express my heartfelt appreciation to UNESCO, to the government of Norway and its permanent mission to the United Nations, as well as the government of Italy for their unwavering commitment not only to this event, but also their essential efforts to championing artistic freedom and ensuring the safety of the courageous artists who enriched our world through their works. To all of those in attendance, both online or in person, your presence is profoundly valued. Today's events promises to be highlighting and invigorating, offering inspiration, and provoking timely consideration of the state of artistic freedom and how we can better support artists at risk. Let us embrace these challenges collectively, fortified by our shared determination to foster positive change for artists and cultural workers. I'm now truly honored to welcome Ms. Zarifa Adiba, a violist and author from Kabul. In 2016, Zarifa became the conductor of the first female orchestra of Afghanistan, and in 2017, conducted the Zara Orchestra at the World Economic Forum in Davos. In addition to playing the viola and conducting, Zarifa has written a book, Playing for Freedom, The Journey of a Young Afghan Girl. The book will be available in English next month on May 5th. So please mark your calendars and go to your bookstore. Through her works and action, Zarifa is a champion of women's and girls' rights, especially their right to education. Zarifa will read an original story entitled Dreams Bombardment, accompanied by an all-new rhubarb instrumental piece she composed with three of her school friends who, since the fall of Kabul, live in 3 different refugee camps across Europe. It's their original song, and it's the worldwide debut. So please join me in welcoming Zarifa.
I would like you all to imagine as I read this story. This story is not a story of just one girl or 4 siblings, but a story of many, many Afghans for the last 20 years. And it goes, my father worked as a laborer while my mother sewed clothes to support him. My 2 brothers and 1 sister were all around the same age. In our insecure city, with a struggling economy and high prices, my brother started working at a bread shop to help our family. The beginning of each month was incredibly difficult. Everyone was stressed about how to pay the rent and utilities. The end of the month was even worse. However, my father made the decision to stop my brother from working and told him to focus on his studies. He wanted him to have a different future than his own. Despite the pain in her eyes from suing so much, my mother never gave up. She was the greatest supporter of our education. She would refer to my brother as Mr. Engineer, and to Yusuf, my other brother, as a lawyer, and to my youngest sister, Miss Ambassador, and to me, I was the artist for her. Day and night, the 4 siblings worked tirelessly to make our parents and our country proud. Then came the darkest day of our lives. My brother, Ali, was killed in his classroom while preparing for the university entrance exam. He was buried. He was buried, taking all his dreams with him, leaving us without hope. We were in pain and lost the courage to dream again. But once again, my parents filled us with hope. My father said that even if he had 1,000 Alis, he would sacrifice them all for education and knowledge. Now, the 3 of us had to carry his dream and work even harder than before. We worked tirelessly, and my brother Yusuf got into Kabul University. Although he wanted to study law, he ended up being accepted into public policy. But my father said, education is education, and it is always valuable. Study with all your heart, my son. Yet, it pained us to realize how precious education had taken away 2 lives now. Yusuf was brutally shot in his classroom at Kabul University. It was my father's second sacrifice on the path of enlightenment. Now it's just me and my sister, and a world of responsibility. We bear the responsibility of our brother's dreams as well as our parents' hopes and wishes. What do we do? My sister and I studied. During nights in Kabul without electricity, we used a torch to study until sunrise. The walls of our rooms were covered in notes of chemistry, biology, math, and the dark history of our beloved Afghanistan. The pictures from our geography books etched the painful history of bloodshed into our minds. With the collapse of Kabul, we could feel the pain even more now. Our geography notes not only remind us of the collapse of Kabul, but also the collapse of millions of dreams, homelessness, and the death of thousands. Life became a mere wish once again for the girls of my land. Afghanistan. Afghanistan was already scary and stressful every day, now felt like a dark prison with the scent of extremists, those who had killed my brothers. Once again, my beautiful father and my brave mother, with immense pain in their hearts, encouraged me and my sister to continue our studies. We both enrolled at College Educational Center and attended classes. Suddenly, we felt so powerful, as if 1,000 girls resided within us, ready to conquer the unjust world in Afghanistan. Every day, my sister, myself, and 300 other girls studied. On the days when we had no electricity in our classroom, we used a torch but never let the lesson stop. The air carried the weight of our efforts for education, our awareness of war, and our determination for a better future for our homeland. And do you know what happened again? While we used torches to complete our classes, they labeled education forbidden, a sin for girls. Every Friday, my sister and I consistently scored over 300 on our entrance exam. We would rush home to share the news with our father. He was always proud. Last night, there was no food. There was no food at home. For the past month, there had been no orders for my mother's sewing, and labor work had disappeared since the collapse of Kabul. The last of my mother's savings was a mere $25. My father asked my mother to give us the money so that we could take our tests. He said he couldn't let us miss our classes. That's my father. Until morning, my heart ached painfully, but I held onto the hope that one day I would repay them for their sacrifices. Today, both my sister and I arrived to our final exam. The exam papers were distributed among the students. Everyone seemed excited, nervous, and engrossed in writing the exam. You know what happened? I even don't know. Suddenly, I heard gunshots. In my country, it's unfortunately not an uncommon sound, so I tried to focus on my exam. But the sound of the gunshots grew louder, closer, and more intense. And then, a deafening explosion. I could barely open my eyes, but I saw my sister. Her hand, which had held a pen, was all that remained. My father appeared before me, his lips dry, and my mother's hand convulsing. My body refused to move. My vision grew darker. I didn't want to die. I wanted to become an artist. I wanted to fulfill my father's dreams. I wanted to see my homeland at peace. But death was more powerful than my dreams. And I closed my eyes. But I know that no one will be able to carry my casket because it will be incredibly heavy, burdened with the weight of millions of goals, dreams, hopes, and wishes. I'm in the sky looking at you all. Make my dream come true. Make my dream come true.
Zarifa, thank you so much. Your reading and music were incredibly moving. We are deeply grateful for the impactful piece you have shared and setting the tone magnificently for this event. While our panelists take seats. Thank you for joining me and Kara. Indeed, the weight Zarifa carries for our generation, for Afghan women and girls, and for a country is immense. We see that with many of the artists who come to ARC for support. Despite the diversity of their personal stories, they all use their creativity and craft to inspire, challenge, and uplift their communities and societies. Their action contribute to the promotion of and respect for basic human rights and fundamental freedoms for all, a purpose at the very heart of the United Nations. Thank you very much again for joining us here today, whether in the room or online, for this event. Indeed, in recent years, and amid a myriad of crises, artists have found themselves targeted through violence, arrest and judicial persecution, threats, intimidatory acts, censorship, harassment in digital and and physical spaces, the loss of income and work opportunities, and much more. At the worst of times, they have been killed. Conflict and crisis continue to plague the lives and work of artists in countries such as Afghanistan, Haiti, Cuba, Myanmar, Sudan, Ukraine, Yemen. And I would be remiss if I didn't directly highlight our deep and continued concern about the ongoing crisis in Gaza, the daily extinguishing of Palestinian creative voices, and the destruction and erasure of cultural spaces and heritage. We must recognize that it's not just during emergencies when artists need support, relocation, and opportunities to continue the work. Too often, as governments adopt authoritarian practices and tactics, artists find themselves in the crosshairs of their repressive gaze. Artists are free spirits and independent voices. Their creativity and ability to connect with the masses strike fear into the hearts of inspiring and established autocrats who seek to co-opt culture, to control narratives, and close civic spaces. In the years past, human rights and environmental defenders, journalists, and women have achieved new normative frameworks for the security and protection. This has included commitments from states and regional bodies, mobilizing of resources, and the introduction of national-level legislation. Socially engaged creatives and cultural workers, visual artists, musicians, writers, composers, filmmakers, sculptors, poets, and a whole host of other disciplines are part of the same civil society as their counterparts and face similar type of repression. However, they are not offered the same protections. The artist's relationship to broad audiences is more profound, indelible, and consequential for advancing the defense of essential rights and freedoms. What we need now for this sector is a new framework for artists' protection and security. We must mobilize the arts and culture ecosystem to center the safety of artists and their resiliency as creators. As you engage with what you hear and learn today, I ask you to consider how we can build on what already exists, the UNESCO 2005 Convention for the Protection of Promotion and the Diversity of Cultural Expression, the 1980 recommendation concerning the status of artists, how we can strengthen this ecosystem, how can we create opportunities for resilience even in the context of crisis and emergencies, how can we shift and push back against narratives that criminalize creativity, and how can we harness the incredible power of arts and culture to create positive change in our world. To help us start wrangling with these complex questions and challenges, I'm excited to introduce our distinguished panelists. So, to start the conversation, Alexandra Xanthaki is the UN Special Rapporteur in the field of cultural rights and Professor of Laws at Brunel University, London. Deeyah is the UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador for Artistic Freedom and Creativity and an award-winning filmmaker and founder and CEO of Fuse, a multi-platform independent media company. Dinaw Mengestu is an Ethiopian-American novelist, writer, and program director of written art at Bard College. In his capacity at the university, he has partnered with ARC on an artist fellowship program launched last year. He has won multiple awards for his writing, and in 2012 was the recipient of a MacArthur Genius Brand. He's a board member of PEN America. DJ Switch is a Nigerian performing artist, DJ, and social activist. She was part of a group of peaceful protesters who assembled at the Lekki toll gate in Lagos on October 20, 2020, which was subsequently brutally attacked by the Nigerian military. It was a transformational moment for the Ansras movement, a social movement against police brutality. And of course, we have already met Zarifa. So we will start with each of our panelists offering a short intervention, followed by a discussion. So then we will have time to take any question from the audience. Please don't forget you have a little index card, so prep your question, and my colleague will pick it up on due time. So, Alexandra, if you would like to be so kind to start.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, but I'm also delighted for this event because it shows, it sheds light and attention, very well-needed attention, to the risks that at the moment are faced by the whole cultural sector. At the moment, we see more cases, more than ever before. This means that we have still cultural workers who are at risk, but it also shows that more and more cultural workers become aware of the mechanisms that exist and at the international level that they can use in order to find some protection from the risk they're taking. I am delighted that gradually artistic freedom is not only seen as part of freedom of expression, but also as part of cultural rights. And how else? Freedom of expression does not fully capture the creativity, the emotional engagement that art brings, the innovation and forward-looking solutions that such creativity includes. Julie asked how we can strengthen the system. Well, first of all, we can strengthen the system if we resist seeing artistic freedom only as part of freedom of expression. This is a very restrictive way, and it does not distinguish between human rights defenders and specifically cultural workers. So in a way, indirectly, it undermines cultural workers. Secondly, if we adopt a human rights approach, so human rights have the tools and the means to protect from states that want to restrict cultural rights and artistic freedom. And we need to use the existing mechanisms. Artists are at risk in the countries where the ethnic tensions and the emergencies take place. However, they are also at risk very often in the countries in which they arrive. There is this paradox that they are in a safe place, but their attachment, their worries, their concerns, and even sometimes the focus of their art is in the previous reality. And we have to protect both. Sometimes I hear artists saying to me that the most difficult question they're asked is, do you like it here? Because it's always in this new place, in this new country. Because it is as if the person pushes them to say, oh, it is paradise, and before I was in hell, and realities are not so black and white. At the moment, unfortunately, we have very few mechanisms to support artists in times of emergency. The liquidity issue in the UN, the big secret, has made even the existing mechanisms not work very well. The special procedures, so my mandate and other relevant mandates, have received 15% of the money they receive every year. So you can imagine that really there is very little we can do, less than 1/5 of what we did last year. In this respect and in this context, it is very important that we have the Aspert program for artists, that, and it has to be congratulated and it has to be expanded. Such programs are oases every year, not least this year, to the artistic community, and this needs to be taken seriously into account. The protection that exists beyond that is quite temporary, so more has to be done. I heard that there is a new group of friends of culture, and maybe this group is going to be different to all sorts of other friends that exist in the United Nations that do very little. where I am encouraged today by the event, and I hope that it will lead to specific, coherent actions to protect artistic freedom in times of emergency and also in times of peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. Deeyah?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alexandra. Dear friends, thank you. Thank you so much, Government of Norway, for everything that you've done for this issue. And it's wonderful to hear. Everything that you said resonated very deeply with me about the role and importance of art and artists. And thank you, UNESCO, of course, and PEN. Zarifa, you touch my heart. You move my heart from what you said. You hurt my heart, you know? But that's the reality. That's the truth of our world. And, you know, several of my friends, they keep asking me, you know, with all the misery in the world, with all the challenges, all the difficulties that we face in all the different corners of the world, why do you waste your time talking about a topic like artistic freedom? It's something that, it's nice to have art, it's beautiful, so what? Fine, people are struggling, people are suffering, people are in pain, people are struggling to hold on to their last breaths, so what do we care? And my answer to that is that in time of pain, in time of struggle, that is exactly when we need art the most. That is exactly when we need artists the most, because it helps us stay alive. It helps us process our pain. It helps us deal with our trauma. It gives us language for it. It gives us pictures for it. It gives us melodies to it. And if we are to heal from what we're going through, if we are to have sincere engagement and sincere dialogue about what it is that is happening to us and what we're doing to each other, we have to have a language that exists in the realm of our emotions. Only speaking to this only gets us so far. Sometimes we have to speak to our hearts. Sometimes we need to feel what we actually are going through. Sometimes we have to sit in that pain and feel what it means to be a human being, and feel what it means when we let each other down. And when we watch each other suffer, we have to wake up and we have to do something. We have to be there for each other. And so to me, art and artists are constantly reminding us of that. Art and artists create what they create, sometimes to tell truths, to tell ugly truths about our societies, to tell us about oppression, to tell us about our hypocrisies, to expose injustices that are going on. Other artists create because they want to create some beauty in times of darkness. They want to make us laugh. They want to make us connect to who we are as human beings. They want us to connect with each other as human beings and remember our humanity, our shared humanity. And others create and they provoke and they piss us off, and that's a part of what we also need. So art is there to challenge, art is there also to heal. I've seen countless young people traumatized by war and violence of various kinds and for various reasons. And I remember speaking to this woman who works with traumatized children, and she told me about this young girl who wouldn't speak. She was unable to speak because of what she had gone through. Art was the only language that she slowly started returning to herself, because it is deeply human to feel. It is deeply human to relate to those parts of ourselves that help us understand, not in an intellectual, cognitive way, but in a feeling way, in a deeply human way. Art is our universal language. It tells us the truths about our lives and about why we're here. It makes us feel less alone. It made her feel less alone, that her loneliness and her sorrow had been experienced by others as well. So beyond everything I've just said, art to me and artists, it's also about liberation. It's about freedom. You know, we use the term freedom of expression. To me, freedom of expression is obviously what we practice in our society, and it's an important right to have. But it's also about an inner liberation and an inner freedom. I remember speaking to a very dear friend of mine who's since passed away, the iconic feminist Nawal Saadawi. And she said, look, every single time I was arrested, every single time I was put into a cell, a prison cell, she said, I always made it a point to dance because I wanted my oppressors to know that my freedom, my inner world is mine. Similarly, I remember I wanted to do a documentary about this years ago and wasn't able to do it. I found these stories of people who were in the concentration camps during Second World War, and they were creating music. I had no idea. They were creating music, and the reason we know this is some of the pieces were smuggled out, written on toilet paper. Some of the guards actually got it out. And again, what is that? What is that? Why would somebody who knows what's about to happen to them still have that incredibly intense urge to create? Because it is about freedom. You can take everything from me, and still I have this, and I have this, and I will still smile, I will still dance, I will still sing, I will still create. And the problem with that is that dictators, oppressors, authoritarians, they know this. They know the power of art. We can sit here in this room and sort of try to make the case for it and try to explain it to each other, but oppressors, they understand it. And the reason we know that they understand it is you can see how severely they punish and crush and repress it. That's why the numbers are as terrible as they are, because they understand. So what we're seeing everywhere is we're seeing artists being imprisoned, we're seeing them censored, we're seeing them banned, we're seeing books disappearing, we are seeing artists even killed and tortured. And in addition to all of our male counterparts' struggles, as women artists, several of us up here today, we experience everything that our male colleagues experience, but we also experience a gendered aspect, a gendered layer of it, which is sexual violence and threats of rape, which I have had from white supremacists in this country. So it's obviously the Taliban. I always say, you know, whenever, well, last time and this time when they came, before they tried to destroy women and start their war on women, they made music go away. Music went silent. So this is what oppressors do. This is why we who are in a position to respond must protect the rights of artists, promote them and support them, and ensure that they can continue to thrive and create freely. Because art is not a luxury, despite what my friends think. It is a basic human necessity. Thank you.
Thank you, Deeyah. Dina?
Thank you, Julie, and thank you to all my panelists and to UNESCO for inviting us to be a part of this conversation. In 2023, after many years of discussion with my colleagues at PEN America and Artists at Risk, the Center for Ethics of Writing at Bard College and Artists at Risk established a novel fellowship program for artists and writers around the world whose lives and often livelihood is at risk because of their work. We provide direct financial and institutional support to these artists, not for what they will do, but rather for what they have done and will hopefully continue to do, despite having gone into exile. The logic and reasoning for this fellowship is both obvious and all too easy to ignore. Unlike journalists or aid workers, writers and artists are sometimes, but not always, found on the front lines. We often work alone in silence and solitude. And the power of the artist's voice to shape and influence our culture is in part a product of that solitude. A solitude that is at once the source of our power and also the cause of a particular vulnerability faced by artists. More often than not, the artist stands alone, without the power or protection of an institutional force behind them, without a system that says the work you do matters, particularly in times of crisis. Because without that work, What is there for the next generation to turn to once the dust has settled? As we know, the decimation of cultural artifacts and history is all too often an unstated objective in times of conflict. And while it might be difficult to shut down a museum, a university, a concert hall, or a library, it's all too easy to quietly arrest, persecute, or send an individual into exile. At the center, our first cohort of fellows include a filmmaker, a poet, a singer, a novelist who have fled their home because of threats from both state and non-state actors. Our fellowship program is just one small attempt to not only call attention to their work, but to say that we, as an institution, stand alongside you. That vulnerability and exile and persecution should not be the price for creating and sustaining our cultural heritage, for making sure art lives as a daily practice and not as the memory of one. We want and need our fellows to continue to make the work that the next generation will turn to, but at the same time, we also know that many of them, having left their homes, are struggling simply to survive. We support them in exile because all too often exile is the only option, which is of course why we are here, asking you to imagine with us a framework that defends the poet, singer, filmmaker, painter whose work, especially in times of crisis, forges the very culture that we hope and need to protect. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina. Switch.
Hello? Hi. You would think as a DJ I'd figure that out, right? My name is Switch. You can call me DJ Switch. And I'd like to actually pick up from something you said, Deeyah. I was here making notes, and you said, it may be, let me break it up a bit. Art could be ugly, or the artist, who's telling you something. So I think I'll just take up that role right now and just be the bad guy. As an artist, everyone that I've come in contact with or worked with, they sometimes find me unbearable. I don't mean to be, but I can't help but just say what is exactly the thing that I'm thinking about. And while I was at the National Endowment for Democracy in DC, and then moved to BARD, where I met you, I always wondered, what am I doing here? What exactly am I doing here? Trying to explain something that I can either, just put into words that would, like you said again, hit you right here in the heart. And you feel that because of how powerful art is. I am the most uncomfortable person on this panel. You can take that to the bank. And that's because I don't know how to explain it to you, but say, ask yourself this question. What is art to me? What do I listen to when I feel down? What do I watch when I feel alone, bored? For entertainment, to remember someone. For love, what do I turn to? And the truth is, it's art. From the moment art is made, it becomes historical and has to be preserved. Whatever form of art is being made has to be preserved. And like you said, dictators know this, oppressors know this, authoritarians have known this. I find it difficult for me to always find myself in places where I have to explain this. And while I am grateful, for instance, I was listening to you, sir, and Norway's contribution. Thank you so much for that. And I do hope everyone, member states, join in because it's important. But it made me think when I was seated over there, like, why? I'll share something real quick. I'm watching a new show called The New Look. And, I see a smile there. All right. You like it, right? Me too. Now, this show, it's about World War II and, you know, the start of the likes of Christian Dior and Coco Chanel and those fancy guys that we find at the malls today. And I remember one of the scenes where Christian Dior was speaking to the man they call the King of Cotton. And he was telling him that he wanted his own house, you know, his own couture house. And the man was like, why, you know? You would think Dior would say, you know, I'm so talented. I want people to wear my designs. He said, I want people to imagine again. I want people to dream again. I want people to be hopeful again. And this is because the Nazis had occupied France for 4 years prior to, you know, allies coming and well, you know the story. And so art has been such a pivotal part of defining history for such a long time, pushing thought process, narrative, culture. As a young person that I like to think I am, when I look at what's going on today, it could be fashion, for instance, and you see a trend going on with young people. Many young people may come across this event online and just go watch a music video. I don't mean to be brutally blunt, but they would do that. And I fear that as time goes by, we may lose the attention of the people we're actually trying to build a better world for. And that's because a lot of them just don't, some of them have short attention spans, they're not interested in conversations like this. And so the best way to reach them is the same thing that has always been the best way to reach people. Please, I'm pleading, actually, that whatever we can do to contribute to art and artists alike, we just have to do it. I sincerely believe that this is a global threat. This is a security threat, actually. I don't mean to sound, over the top, but like I talked about trends, for instance, yes? Music today is constantly being diluted, polluted. Film today is constantly being diluted, polluted. Subliminal messages are flying up in there. And it is shaping how our children, how even some of us who are like getting older and should have more sense, it's shaping how we think. It's shaping how we behave. And there are people who are powerful people behind this dilution or this pollution. Now, when we come to a setting like this, it is people like you that we can actually make the case to and say, hey, if we're going to talk and promote socially conscious material, right, we need your help. Because I'll tell you now for free, if I'm not talking about sex, it's not really going to sell. So how do I talk about socially conscious issues that is in a fun way, that is in an easy way to understand? This is why we need to work with artists that know how to do this. If I came and showed you a film or sang a song and said, 2,000 people died yesterday, you'd be like, oh my gosh, gruesome. But I could sing a song, which I hope to do later today to you all, and tell you about that song real quickly. It's about loss, but it's about loss that I think anyone who's lost anyone can actually picture and hear themselves say those words, as opposed to making it about a particular event where someone can listen to it, they have no connection with it, and they walk away. So these are the types of things artists can do. Just one example. I made a ton of points, I've forgotten them, but yes, thank you for having me here.
Zarifa, do you want to say a few words? Thank you, DJ Switch.
Very short. Thank you. I'm really honored to be sitting here with amazing individuals. I'm going to say one sentence. I'm from Afghanistan, and music is banned in my country. I don't want to sound like, oh, poor you. I want to say that even today, when there's a group who killed my friends, who broke the instruments in my school, are ruling that country, there are still people in Afghanistan who are playing beautiful, beautiful music underground. They are doing it secretly, and they are keeping the music of Afghanistan alive while risking their lives. I don't want to sound negative, because today sitting here and listening to everyone and seeing you all here, it is obvious that we care about art. We know the importance of art. And the fact that we all are gathered, it means that we are doing something for art. Because art is, I have said it before too, I'm going to say it again today, art is the most beautiful and the most powerful tool to bring people together, to create harmony among people, beyond their race, beyond their religion, beyond their color. That's the beauty of art. Why not preserve it? Why not work for it? And why not support any artist anywhere they are? When I came to New York in 2022 summer, I was scared. I was scared to death. The only thing I didn't want to be was becoming a refugee. I love my country, but I never wanted to become a refugee. But I think I am the luckiest and most fortunate refugee in the refugee world history, because I was surrounded by artists. In Broadway, everyone in Broadway came around me, and they put their hands around me and protected me and supported me, and they were there for me. And I think one thing in mutual that we all had that made my life easier and that they welcomed me, that they made New York home for me, was because they were artists. Because we artists don't look at other human beings based on their gender, based on their religion, based on their skin color, based on where they are from, or based on their language. We look at you and we are like, oh, you have a heart and you have a soul and I care about you. That's what art teaches people. So I think we should work for art and save artists and do good works.
Thank you very much, Zarifa. Before I ask a few questions to the panelists, just want to remind you to please put your questions on the cards. My colleagues are picking them up, and I will read them. Thank you. So thank you for sharing your words, your stories, your expertise with us. To start, I think what I would love to know from kind of your different perspective, what do you think, like artists and cultural workers need really a distinct support, like such as we have for human rights defender or journalists? Alex?
I think that a lot of cultural workers are human rights defenders. However, the human rights defenders category has not been seen always as including all of the cultural workers. So first of all, this category was not made for cultural workers, and it did not include in its definition, the idea of cultural workers at the beginning. But I think that more than that, human rights defenders do amazing work to defend human rights. Cultural workers do amazing work to defend the right to artistic freedom, but also art and emotions and our past, our present, and our future. So in this respect, there are some common elements, but I think that cultural workers and people working in the cultural sector need maybe a different type of protection. They cannot be included in the only and always in the human rights defenders.
Would you like to add something, Dinaw? Seeing you.
I would also want to add to that. We know obviously that we do target cultural institutions, but we also know that without artists living, you don't actually have a living culture. And there's a specific reason why the individual artist might be targeted, because you can remove them from that cultural space, from those communal spaces. And once you do so, you actually achieve a very long-term goal, which is you not only remove that voice, right, but you also erase a type of culture that's in the process of being made. You lose the ability to actually know what happened, not only in that particular moment, but when the next generation decides to look back. And they want a legacy and they want a history. Those are the voices that oftentimes disappear really quickly and really quietly because they are singular and because they don't have the same support and resources as an institution does.
I think that, you know, I tend to straddle both the world of artists and also journalists because I do documentary films. And what I see and observe a lot within the journalistic community is that there are very structured systems and networks in place that provide support for journalists as soon as they're targeted. There is an incredible sense of solidarity also that has been nourished for decades when it comes to journalists in a way that is not accessible to artists. I think also for human rights defenders and particularly, you know, we also see women's rights defenders also, and peace builders actually as well, benefit from resources and again, international networks that I think artists do not have. So I think a lot of the needs that artists have are similar to the counterparts within journalism and human rights defenders, but the systems don't exist and the specificity of some of the needs. For example, if you take a heavy metal guitarist from Iran or a female singer from Iran out and make her safe, she also has to exist. So how artists then exist within their new lives, and Zarifa, I'm very happy to hear that you have found that kind of community. I think there are specific needs like that that we don't address for artists, but also just safe routes out. I remember when the Afghan catastrophe happened, there were so many artists, poets and musicians that started reaching out, as well as women's rights defenders. When I was doing, I call it sort of a tour of groveling and begging different governments to let people in, high-risk individuals in, they all were okay taking the female judges, they were all okay taking the journalists, they were all okay taking the human rights defenders, but musicians and the artists, they sort of didn't roll their eyes, but it was sort of, it wasn't even at the bottom of the list. They didn't really factor in, because they didn't consider the role of artists as significant enough, and they also didn't consider the threat that artists were under significant enough, even though artists were being targeted first by the Taliban.
I also think one of the places we should start from is broadening that definition, you know, of when we think about cultural workers, artists, and the likes. When we say freedom of expression, it's almost like, you know, just something you're thinking about. Like, it's almost like a thought, really. And, you know, you're entitled to your thought, blah, blah, blah. That's okay. As opposed to how you think of a journalist and under that definition of freedom of speech, for instance. I think, you know, those that should, however we all can actually, broaden that definition of where artists fall on and what type of rights that is. As far as I'm concerned, I made a note here where I was saying human rights violation. One of the major human rights violation against artists is actually against the public. It's actually against you. You know, the removal of art or artists, or the fact that, you know, that censorship, right? It's actually an offense to the public. Like you said, you know, the history is there. And Dinaw said earlier that what will our kids turn to? So I think for people to start addressing it different or treating artists differently, I think first of all we should start by broadening the definition under which artists fall under when we talk about human rights and what type of
I just feel like, I think it's so important what you're saying, and I think part of the challenge that we have is I think in very, very many circles, I think the value of art and artists, it just doesn't hold the same level of respectability. It just doesn't, and value and contribution as what journalism brings to the table. So I think that therefore, having to make the case over and over why art matters, why artists matter, and it is so important. It's exhausting. I agree with you. And it's frustrating sometimes, but it is absolutely necessary. And that's why I constantly try to bring up the point of people who want to create, people who want to take hope away from a population, people who want to control a population or repress a population. One of the first, front line that they target is journalists, human rights defenders, artists, and intellectuals. And women, but that's always the case, right? So it's very important, I think, to constantly remind ourselves why abusers understand that power, and we don't, so we have to.
I just want to quickly mention that I called myself, I am the luckiest. Although there are other troubles too, as being refugee, but I am the luckiest because I end up with musicians. I have 3 of my friends who composed the music that you heard today. One is in Germany in refugee camp for the last 2 years now. One is in Portugal in refugee camp for the last 2 years. And one is in Bulgaria in refugee camp. And we meet through Zoom and we make music, right? So what Deeyah said, I want to point out on it even more that around the world, my artist friends, my musician friends are not being respected, are not given their rights, are still fighting just to leave. My friends cannot play music very loud when they're in camp. So we have to find, in 1 week, we have to find 1 hour so we can come together and we can record that music or we can compose that music. So that, artists, especially musicians, even do not have that right, especially Afghan musicians after the fall of Kabul. So yeah, I just wanted to.
Thank you very much. As I'm taking some questions from the audience, I would like first to give the floor to the permanent representative of Myanmar. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you, organizers, Norway, Italy, and UNESCO for organizing this event. I also like to thank all panelists for your touching remarks. It's really touching for us. It is our responsibility to defend their creative voices, because today, event is in particular, is really relevant one for our country, what happening in Myanmar. Since the illegal military coup in Myanmar in February 2021, thousands of artists with various backgrounds, they joined the people fight against the military junta. Their voices are strengthening, stronger, calling for the ending of military dictatorship in Myanmar. So taking this opportunity, I'd like to thank our artists who joined this strike against the military, ending the military dictatorship and restoration of democracy in Myanmar. Because of the military atrocities, some artists joined the defense forces on the ground. Some artists have to hide. Some artists has to flee from the country and take refuge in the area controlled by the ethnic resistance organizations and the border areas in other countries. Some were able to seek refuge in the third countries. So I'd like to thank those third countries for their support. Despite various difficulties, many artists are committed to fight against the military dictatorship through their professional work. Some made short films, documentary films, some organized performances, art shows, comedy shows, singing concerts, etc., to strengthen our revolution. Of course, there are some artists who are encountered to make a living in a foreign environment. I fully share the Ms. Zarifa for your experience, because some artists, they work at the sushi shops here in the United States. Some work at the Uber Eats. Some work at the like casino. It's so painful for our artists. So your support is greatly for them. So I'm really taking this opportunity. I really like to urge the international community to support the artists to continue their professional wherever they are. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I think you make the perfect segment for a question from the public. How can artists in exile find a community, not only locally but also globally? And it's, resonate with your statement, Deeyah, saying they are alone. There's no recognition of really at the bottom of the basket, of the long list. So I'd like to ask you this question, like how can artists find a community globally, within the diaspora, and with other artists in exile, kind of to foster this sense of communality and also sharing, standing together. I've learned from my experience at ARC that, artists, as Zarifa saying, I have my Broadway community, really, really need desperately this community to be there, to work together. So I'd like to ask you this question.
You're not asking me.
Yeah, I will ask Dinaw, who's making some face.
I'm sorry, I thought you were saying Deeyah. I think I would also just maybe start by knowing that oftentimes exile is the objective. It is the thing that is being used as a weapon, and not the solution. And so when we lose our artists, when they have to leave home, it's rarely, obviously, of course, because they want to. It's obviously because they're being forced to. And that departure is actually the start of a different crisis, right? It's the question of how do I survive? How do I not only continue to make my art, but how do I care for my family? We have a fellow right now who is living in incredibly dire and difficult circumstances, and we are trying actively with ARC to provide them just sometimes the basic material to live, to send her son to school. So I think we have to consider exile not as obviously a solution, right, but actually the first phase in a secondary crisis which needs to be addressed. And that means not only providing and thinking about how do we support the artists who've had to leave their homes, what are the things that we can actually do to provide them with the material support so they can continue to survive, but also, of course, how do we create those communities? And one of the things we've done with ARC is to actually bring artists from different parts of the world who work in different mediums and who are gathered together simply by the fact that their lives and livelihood have been put at risk because of the work they do. That's the umbrella that holds them together. And I think a larger, more expansive umbrella that actually does that only signals to our artists around the world that there's a large community that is global.
So, in this role, in the Special Rapporteurship, one becomes very happy for the initiatives that are being taken, but also very disappointed for the words that have been saying without follow-through. When we talk about how you find a community, first of all, you're absolutely right. Artists have to survive in the new place, and first of all, they have to go to the new place, so there are very few states, my understanding is, and PEN Americas knows more about that than I do, that provide visas for artists. More states, must come on board and provide visas for artists. When they are in the States, they are not as well catered for as one would have hoped for. There are discriminatory practices on where the artist comes from. We have seen, although it's fantastic that we have Ukrainian artists, we have seen Ukrainian artists pushing away other artists that were there before and now, and they're always kind of a part of, unfortunately, politics. But also when we talk about community, my 2023 report to the Human Rights Council was about migration and cultural rights. And in preparing for this report, we realized that there is no one community. In the same way that artists here have a lot of communities, they have in place of emergency a lot of communities. So we see artists that come to the new place, and the conservative part of the diaspora is against them, whereas the progressive part of the diaspora is in favor of them, whereas the other religious parts are. So there is this, in order to find a community, it's not necessarily the community of where the artist comes from. We have seen the artists facing tokenism. So states want to show that they take migrant artists into account, so they just put one migrant artist in the boards just to sit there, and there you go. We have our migrant here, artist. We also see how much they lose. They lose their tools. They lose their language, which very often is, the tool for expressing oneself. And of course, they lose their ways for funding. They don't know. Usually, they're not placed in the capital. They're placed in other parts of the country, so they don't have the support to find out ways of funding. And of course, at the end of the day, they want to go back. They don't necessarily want to stay in the place where they are, but they don't have the certainty to know what's going to happen, and this lack of certainty has an immediate effect on their expression. So I think that the community and the important role of the state should not be undermined in helping these artists find their communities wherever and whichever these communities may be, from their past, from their present, but also looking at a different future. Thank you.
I think we are about time, and I'm seeing Cara making some eyes. So I'd like to ask a last question from the audience, and we have a reception afterwards, so please don't think I'm censoring yourself. You can ask your questions. I think I will give this question for my colleague at Free Muse, which is a global music freedom of expression organization doing great work. This person would like to know what are kind of the specific and social challenges that musicians are really kind of facing, and probably I'm going to turn to you, Zarifa, and switch. What are the specific challenges musicians, as their own kind of disciplines?
In New York or in our own country?
I think it's around the globe.
Around the globe.
I mean, in New York, they're facing also some challenges.
New York is heaven for musicians. Challenges that... okay, I'm going back to 2017, when NATO was in Afghanistan, international community was in Afghanistan, a lot of projects were coming in Afghanistan, and everyone was happy that, everything is good, right? We created our very first female orchestra of Afghanistan, 30 girls from different parts of Afghanistan. We came together, and we played at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Most of us were studying music in secret because even our families were not supporting it. After Davos, few girls got married forcefully by their parents. One girl went to her home, and we don't know where she is now, since then till now. I had to leave music school after Davos because of pressures and other things that happened after my trip. So just imagine you live in a society that because you play viola, because you play piano, because you play rhubarb, you risk your life. Every note that you play on your instrument, you risk your life. You accept death, but you still try to play for freedom. In my community, when everything was good, music was this hard to study. Today, musicians, artists everyone is silenced in my country. That's why whenever I get an opportunity to come in events like this, I just come to remind people that there is a land where thousands of Zarifa is living with dreams to play beautiful music, to speak loudly, to write beautiful stories, to paint amazing, amazing paintings, but they are not allowed to. They are not allowed because there are people, extremists, who are not allowing them to do. So whenever I get this chance, I just come to remind that, oh, there are thousands of Zarifas in a land called Afghanistan. Don't forget it. Thank you.
Thank you, Zarifa. Switch, do you want to take the mic?
All right. So I think I'll just go in the order of, I was trying to write it down here, major problems that artists face. And, you mentioned a lot of things. I'm actually doing one of those jobs as well because I need to take care of myself and all of that stuff, which by the time, and think about these types of jobs, yeah? I'm a graduate of the University of Port Harcourt. I studied geology. I love art, and that's where I branched off from. And at the risk of sounding like, oh, I can't do that, I'm not that type of person. I pretty much will do what I need to do to survive. I think it's just human nature. And so I found myself doing one of those jobs, which I think it's a decent, honorable job. But the question is that what you want to do? Is that what you're passionate about? That can stunt creativity, big time. When you find yourself doing something that you're not passionate about. So this is not a put down on any type of job. If it's rideshare, you're delivering food. I actually think it's a great gig, to be honest. Yeah, I have the time to do this work and meet different people and just get different experiences. But by the time you're done running around town doing this job, you're so exhausted you can't even put those experiences down in a creative manner. And then you lose it the next day. So there's that, which again is a financial thing. There is this feeling that many musicians have, which is like you feel like you're in a state of limbo. Like what's happening? You know what I mean? Especially when I'm grateful to have met you, Julie, and Xerxes and all those guys at the NED and Julie and Co at Bard. But the thing is this, again, back to our conversation of definition, because I was first like a first type situation, no one really knew where to put me. And so you find that I'm being given tasks that you would give to a journalist to do. So now I've got to write an op-ed. An op-ed? What? Right? And so I'm like, all right, let me do that. But because you have to be there and find a way to get your information out. And if the best way to do it is by writing an op-ed, which is not something I don't think I'm great at. By the way, no one ever published. Case in point. If I did that, it is to say, hey, look, I really have something to say, but organizations like that don't really know where to begin from. Another thing I put down here was immigration issues and processes. While I respect the immigration process here in this country, it is quite hard and long, and I understand that there's backlog. There's so many people trying to come to this country. It's a great country, so I see why, right? And I hate to sound like give certain people preferential treatment, but there are people who found themselves here. It wasn't in the plan. My story, try not to do my best not to bore you, I was part of the NSARS group, and we had been fighting against police brutality in Nigeria for the longest time. I've got dreadlocks. Young people like me would be attacked and brutalized by the SARS officials or policemen and women in Nigeria because of something like dreadlocks. So you've got ripped jeans. So you're walking around with a laptop. They're like, oh, you're into fraud, and And you may just be an IT specialist, but no real care to know or to find out. And there had been cries about this from many young people, but it didn't really garner that sort of like attention and support that it needed until artists actually took center stage. The likes of Falz the Bad Guy, you know, and many other artists, when they came out, Wizkid, Burna Boy, like, hey, look, we've got to put an end to this. Nigeria had never seen such size of peaceful protesters. Peaceful protesters. It's important I stretch and stress that word peaceful, because the narrative was that we were not peaceful, and that's not the truth. But all of this was also documented. Again, that's the beauty of art. Through music, we found a way to document it. Through pictures, we found a way to document it. Through drawings and cartoonists found a way to document that. And so imagine going out there to do something like that, and then you're faced with soldiers shooting at you. Still don't know how I'm sitting here today. And then all of a sudden, you're contacted to say, change your story, and we'll give you whatever you want. And I remember saying, and I quote, I'd rather live poverty-stricken under a bridge. Because when I went live on Instagram, I thought I was going to die, but I wanted people to see what was happening to us and how we died. And somehow, some of us were able to make it out of there. This was carried by CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, you name it. And so, of course, the Nigerian government was furious about this, and they tried to change the narrative. And when at least me and a couple of people that I know, thankfully refused to do that, then they went after the things that are important to you. They freeze your accounts. They seize your assets and stuff like that. And so thanks to organizations like Amnesty International, the Endowment for Democracy in DC, which helped move me out of the country. I was smuggled out of the country through the forest. No shower for days. You know, I don't want to say some really foul things, but I had to just let go of certain things while on the move. I smelled really bad. And so to come here and then be grateful that you made it out and then wait through that same process, it is demoralizing. And we've got great allies like you all, you know, in positions where we can say, hey, is there a way we can expedite this so that we can actually get to work? Because it is illegal to work in this country without documents. I don't care what anybody says. I know things may be hard, but you have to get your documentation. We can't be fighting for what's right and then do what's wrong. So if there's a way we can help facilitate, you know, maybe be a catalyst to these things to help with that so that artists can get back to what they need to get back to. And just the last thing, when you talked about community, yes, it's not one community, but we still need to find a way to get like-minded people. While it may not be one community, sorry, you said, actually, my bad. While we may not have one community, but we can have like-minded people. I'm so proud of you, and I'm grateful that you found one, you know, but then you can find other artists who may not particularly be instrumentalists, and then because we creatives are also very judgmental too, and so it depends on where you're at, what types of creatives you're with, so that you can actually shine. I wouldn't work well in that group, you know what I mean? Because I might be like, hey, how do I contribute? But I might work well in another group and contribute. That's it.
Thank you, Switch. It was actually a beautiful call for action. So thank you so much. We have to wrap up. I have been given the cat. So what has come out of this today is a clear and urgent call for more state engagement and more resources and more opportunities in support of artists and cultural workers. And for there to be new norms at the international level in support of artists and creative freedom. That said, the emergencies we confront, whether impact individuals, communities, or their entire societies, are diverse and varied. since ARC's inception, we have continued to see surging cases and emergency crises that jeopardize the life and livelihood of artists. My team and our global partner work tirelessly to get artists the support they need, but it's not always enough, and clearly we have heard that today from our distinguished panelists. Temporary emergency responses are critical, but reactive care. We need to create a proactive action plan for the protection of artists at the international level. Day in and day out, I see in my own eyes, like our panelists, the courage of artists taking a massive authoritarian governments, militaries, or non-state actors with nothing more than a paintbrush, a pen, or an instrument. They are stigmatized, ostracized, and repressed because they dare to fight for our collective rights, our collective liberation. As someone who wakes up every morning racking my brain to identify more opportunities and ways to support artists, I can tell you that our success as well as our failure are collective. There's no place in our future for ambivalence or indifference toward the status of artists and cultural professionals. We must be more active, more accountable, more responsible. We must adapt and meet creatives where they are at. Simply put, we need action, and now. Crises do not wait for us to be ready, and failure cannot be tolerated when lives are at stake. We are at a crucial intersection in what has been a long path towards safeguarding artistic freedom. While there is still much to do, we are primed to make tangible and positive action that mobilize and defend creative voices. And I look, and we all look as panelists and UNESCO representatives, to continuing on this path with you all. And with that, I bring a close to this excellent discussion, even though I'm sure we could spend more and more hours brainstorming, scheming, and developing ideas. I urge you to reach out to us at UNESCO, at ARC, at Pan America to continue this conversation. Thank you again to our panelists, and a special thank you to Zarifa for sharing with us her new work. Thank you to UNESCO, to the Permanent Mission of Norway, to the Permanent Mission of Italy for partnering with us, and thank you again for our audience, both here and around the world, for their engagement. Please make sure to follow us. We have some handles and hashtags, and I will thank you again for your participation and for being here with us. And thank you to you guys.
Thank you, Julie. On behalf of UNESCO, we would like to sincerely thank all of you for taking the time to join us here today, in person and online, for this important discussion on the freedom of artistic expression. We're especially grateful to our panelists for joining us today, and thanks especially to those who traveled far to be here on the panel. Our heartfelt thanks go to our partner, Pan America Artists at Risk Connection, and to our colleagues at the UNESCO New York office for working closely with us to organize this event. Last but not least, we would like to express our gratitude to the Kingdom of Norway for their contribution to the UNESCO Ashberg Program for Artists and Cultural Professionals, which made this event possible today.